everybody. Welcome. I'm Daniel G. Garza, and this is another episode of Put It Together Conversations. Welcome to the show. Want to invite all of our friends on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad that you can be here. If you are inclined to, please share this on your page and let your friends and family follow along in the conversation and join us for this hour. If you're on YouTube, will you do me a favor and scroll down and hit that subscribe button and like our video? That really helps us a whole lot. Thank you for joining us. This week, I know people have called me out on it. I'm always excited for my guests, but I am. Every week it's somebody new. Sometimes there's friends that I've made along the way, colleagues, people that I work with, but I get to meet them in a whole new light. And for those of you new to Put It Together Conversations, this is a show about folks, where they come from, where they are now, and what their journey is like. And the idea of the show is to motivate and inspire other people to go after their dreams and goals. And I hope after this conversation today, you're inspired and motivated to go after your dreams and goals. My guest today is we started as colleagues, work colleagues. We were working together on a project, and then we became friends. We got to talk for a little bit and get to know each other. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my guest. Hold on, let me bring up his name so that you guys know. Live TV, folks, when you want your little clickers to work. There we go. Seth is a patient advocate, community connector, and motivational speaker who is passionate about bringing his personal experience to support the health community. His passion is driven by his mother's 17-year battle with the rare genetic disease known as Huntington's disease. At the age of 20, Seth also tested positive for the disease and is a gene carrier. He is the founder of the nonprofit Our Odyssey, which provides year-round social and emotional support to young adults impacted by a rare or chronic condition. He has a master's in nonprofit management from DePaul and currently resides in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Professionally, he works as a patient leader recruitment manager at WeGo Health. And that is one of the reasons I'm wearing the shirt today. I am a member of WeGo Health. You've heard me talk about it on other shows. And if you stick around, I will post the link to WeGo Health. So if you're a patient advocate and would like to get connected, you can go there too. So without further, let me bring him on. Hello, Seth.
What's happening? Happy May 1st.
Yes, happy May 1st. How are you doing? There's so many. For those of you that follow me on Facebook, on my personal page, I post, and hi, Piper. Nice to see you, sweetie. I post a National Today thing, but there are so many things that are celebrated May 1st, which is really kind of cool. My favorite was, oh my God, I just read the rebirth page. Today is a day of rebirth. So for all of you out there who are looking to change yourself up, pick yourself up, and become somebody, a better version of you, today's the day to do it. But Seth, hi.
Hello. Yeah, no, May is also, I feel like, full of awareness days and months for different health conditions, including it is the first day of Huntington's disease awareness month.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you just want me to jump into it, but I'm more than happy to do so. So I've been involved in the health space, in particular in Huntington's disease, for now 15 years. And it started when I was 15 years old, and that was when my mom was officially diagnosed with this disease. But prior to that, she was misdiagnosed for the first 5 to 7 years with bipolar disorder, because she had these mood swings where she'd be like just frustrated, angry, or depressed, and then next thing she's perfectly fine. And perhaps it was also major depression, but it didn't make sense because she also had like slurred speech, wobbly movements, like these drunk-like movements where people were like, what's wrong with your mom? And we're like, nothing. Like, she hasn't been drinking or anything. And it was very challenging because, we didn't have any answers. We're kind of living with the unknown, which I'm sure many people can relate to with today's world with COVID and everything. But once we finally learned about her diagnosis, it did provide that answer, but also provided like what's next in life. And for me, being 15 at the time, I went to Google, started looking into it, and I was like, wow, this is a lot. And they say Huntington's disease is like having ALS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's all in the one
Oh,
condition.
wow.
Yeah, and I think what's challenging is that not only does it resemble those three conditions, but it slowly deteriorates a person's physical and cognitive abilities with also a psychiatric component on average about 10 to 20 years. So if you think about like other health conditions, right, some progress a lot faster. But like for me, I unfortunately lost my mom twice. Once when she got diagnosed with the disease, and once when she passed away about 6 years ago. And so I had to kind of try to accept this new normal of my life and say, well, what does that mean for me? And how do I kind of fit into society, right? I mean, we can probably jump into that aspect of like, we live in a society where, you're always trying to fit in with your peers, with society. You might feel judged. You're like, oh, I got to do this. I got to, act cool or whatever the case might be. And when my mom got sick, I was kind of like, oh, no one's going to understand me. And I don't want people to judge me for this. And I don't want to be known as the kid with the sick mom. So I was really embarrassed actually to be out in public with her or have friends over because I didn't want people to view me for that. Luckily, I kind of got over that mindset slowly but surely. But even today, I still deal with, I think, the kind of aspect of not trying to feel judged or defined by Huntington's disease because it's only a part of me. It doesn't define me as a person or as a human.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. I just didn't want us to get into the conversation and not bring that up and have it highlighted. Sure. But for those of you, because I usually tell people how we met, Seth, as you can see, I'm wearing the We Go Health shirt. And I messaged Seth this morning. I'm like, is it cool if I wear my We Go shirt? Because there's not a lot of opportunities to be able to wear it. So
yeah, you gotta rock it. You gotta rock it.
And so if you are following me on Instagram, or actually you don't even have to follow me on Instagram, you might have noticed me pop up in some of the ads. I'm working with another company on some of their promotions for HIV awareness and PrEP awareness. So as you scroll into Instagram, I may pop up, I may, but that's thanks to Seth connecting me with that project, and that campaign is how we met. I am going to tell them that we were emailing back and forth, and I was like, whoa. Before we continue in this, I need to meet you in person. Like, I need to know who this Seth Rotberg. Who is this dude that's pimping me out? And how dare you? How dare you, Mr. What am I, Pretty Woman? But we ended up having, I think it was supposed to be like a 30-minute visit. We ended up talking for like an hour or an hour and a half or something like that. But you were super cool, and that's how we met. And once I knew your story, I was like, dude, you got to come on the show. Like, there's like,
yeah, no. And what's interesting is, I think, so I started We Go Health at the beginning of February. And so like, that was like the first project I joined. And so I'm actually glad that you kind of were like, hey, like, who are you? Like, let's hop on like a call and chat. I'm like, that's probably a good idea. Let's do it. And it was good because I think honestly, because of that, that's kind of now I'm like, and my other colleagues do this as well, but like, I didn't realize, oh, maybe that is a good idea. And now it's like, no, this has to be part of the process. It's like, let's hop on a call or connect, because it's like, yeah, you can email back and forth, but then you really get to know them on a more personal level. And, I really enjoyed learning about the work you're doing in kind of the health space as well. And when you were like, hey, you want to join my, kind of, I guess, live stream. Yeah. I don't know what you call it these days, but when you said, hey, join this cool show I'm doing, I was like, sure, let's make it happen. Although, well, you're a busy guy. I was like, dang, I got to wait till May 1st. And I think I booked it in like March, and now you're like booked out until June. Man, keep him busy.
Hi, Pablo. Thank you for joining us. Pablo is one of our watchers, and he's really cool about sharing our show. So thank you for sharing all of our Little Mexican productions. Yeah, I'm very blessed that I've been in entertainment now for 15 years and had my podcast for 9. But when we launched the live stream, a lot of folks who had already been on the show were like, "Hey, I want to come back and do the lives." And I knock on wood, and I'm very blessed that we are booked. For those of you who might be watching this on replay, this is May 1st, and we are booked till mid-June with guests. And there's people on hold that want to be on that. So please, if you have a Put It Together story, come on over. We'd love to have you be part of the Put It Together family. So thank you for being here, Seth. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I saw some of your comedy. You're quite the funny guy too.
Well, I try. The last thing I'll say about me is I like keeping busy. And for those of you who are kind of wondering what We Go Health is, can you tell them just a little bit of description of what We Go Health is and does, just so that we know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So We Go Health is a mission-driven company where we connect patient leaders like yourself, Daniel, to healthcare companies, because what we realize is we want to make sure that the patient voice is infused into the everyday work that these healthcare companies are doing. But most importantly, making sure it's, authentic and real when you perhaps see an ad on social media, or you're trying to really learn more about the unmet needs of the community, and making sure that we're working with advocates who are saying, hey, I have a story, or hey, I want to get involved, and trying to get them involved. And so we do provide paid opportunities for patient leaders, but we also have a really cool platform where you can kind of take these different challenges, but also take these free courses to learn more about how to be a keynote speaker, or kind of how to publish a blog, or other kind of opportunities. And I definitely recommend it for those who are trying to take those next steps in advocacy, or just looking to kind of stay up to date with what's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah. So just to put the conversation that aside, just to let me know, I've been a member since 2017, and you guys have heard me talk about Healthy Voices. That's how I got connected to WeGo, which then connected me to some aging campaigns and projects that I've been part of. And again, if you're scrolling on Instagram, I may pop up on your feed. So just hit that like button. Make sure that we know that you're watching us. We appreciate that.
And you did a great job on that campaign of not just the photos, which I will say was very well done, but also, the content, right? Because we do ask kind of these questions so that we can build the content with you, versus saying, hey, we're going to build it for you, but it's, hey, we're doing this together.
Yeah. And so it's really cool. So if you're a patient advocate, or if you want to get into patient advocacy and you're looking for the right platform to start, We Go Health for sure is a great way to go get some feedback, how-tos. There's a lot of people ready to help. And if you join it, look for me, and I am more than happy to guide you in the world of advocacy. I want to remind everybody watching, this is Put It Together Conversations. My guest today is Mr. Seth Rotberg, and we're talking about advocacy and his personal life. So we've talked enough about other stuff. Let's talk about you. Tell us, Seth Rotberg, tell us how you put it together.
Yeah. So kind of to go back to that story of finding out about my mom's diagnosis when I was 15, I was definitely in denial for those first couple of years because of just trying to process it all, right? It was new to our family. It's a genetic disease, but she's the first one in our family to be diagnosed with it. So there wasn't any other kind of family history. And so it took kind of a few years just to kind of grasp the concept, and also realized that I was at risk for this disease and that I could end up like her one day. And it wasn't until I went to college where I kind of realized that and wanted to learn more about it, and was like, maybe I should go through testing. Maybe I should learn if I have the same disease that my mom has, and, kind of learn about my future. And so I eventually went through testing at the age of 20. I tested positive for it, which Huntington's disease is very interesting because what that means is that I'm a gene carrier and I'm guaranteed to get it, but I don't have symptoms yet. And so in order for you to be officially diagnosed with Huntington's disease, you need to have motor symptoms because they're easier to see, right? But the cognitive and psychiatric component can actually come earlier on, prior to the motor symptoms. I just, and this is just my own personal thoughts, and what I'm aware of is there's a lot of different tests, right, to test cognitive abilities. And so it might be a little bit more tricky to figure out, oh, did the symptoms already start? And so I say all this, right, because yes, people say, oh, so you tested positive, does that mean you're going to get it? It's like, yes, unless there's an effective treatment or a cure, I'm going to get it and end up like my mom one day. And so, it is quite scary because I tested 10 years ago, and you can do the math, that was when I was 20. So I'm 30 going on 50 because I have an old soul. But it's challenging because for me, I feel like I'm always racing against time, and I'm always trying to figure out, like, is this a symptom? Is this not a symptom? And sometimes overthink things, but I've learned over, especially the last year with COVID, like, I have to, one, take care of myself, but two, like, really practice more of this mindfulness practice. And that's really helped me at times with making sure that I'm taking care of myself mentally, not just physically, but mentally as well, because it's so important. But I'm a big believer in that my voice matters, right? Like, and I say this because I don't qualify for any of the trials because I'm not diagnosed yet. So they want people who are officially diagnosed. And to me, like, well, if I'm going to take your treatment one day, my voice is important because is it going to be too much for me to take? Or what type of way do I want to take it? Do I want to take an oral pill? Is it going to be an IV injection? Is it going to be a spinal tap? Is it going to be like gene therapy? And then it's also like, which symptoms would I want to be provided, like, improvement on, I guess you could say.
Now, before you continue, I'm curious because, like, you were tested, but you're not diagnosed?
Correct. Yeah. So, So you can test, once you turn 18, you can, go through genetic testing. There's over 40,000 Americans who have Huntington's disease, and then another 200,000 plus at risk. But of that, about 10 to 15% actually go through testing because they say, well, do I really want to know if I'm going to develop this if there's no effective treatment or cure? Or do I really want to know about this if I don't need to know right now? And so I was one of those 10 to 15% who tested. And yeah, technically I am not diagnosed yet because I don't have any motor symptoms, knock on wood. Like, I'm good with that. But could there be declines in my cognitive and psychiatric capabilities? Perhaps, right? That would probably have to be like a MRI scan or something like that. Yes, exactly what Piper said. I have the gene. It's not technically activated yet, or it could technically be activated because of, this Huntington gene that everyone has, but I also have immune part of it, which is like the bad one. And so it could have already started, but again, I'm not diagnosed yet.
So there are a couple of things that you mentioned, and it's interesting because as you were saying that the time thing, I wrote down time on my card, my notes. I was about to ask, like, how does that make you feel, like, time-wise? Like, so I'm going to put the questions together. Your state of mind, like knowing that this is, for lack of better words, like it's this little ticking time bomb that's just waiting to go off. And does that mess with your anxiety of, I need to accomplish so many things, or is that a motivator to say, I need to accomplish these things? You know what I mean? Like, it could be a debilitator, or it could be a motivator.
Honestly, I think it's a mix. It's a mix of both, because when I tested, I used it as motivation to get more involved in the community by taking on leadership roles, by sharing my story, by fundraising, by doing a TEDx talk on my story to, really helping others along kind of their path. And I think that's kind of, the idea of, I got to keep hope alive. I got to get involved. It's that fight or flight mentality. But at the same time, there's a lot of anxiety because of, am I running out of time? Am I going to have enough time to, date and have a family and all that? Will someone accept me romantically? Like, can I get a wife who's going to accept this, right? That they're going to say, oh, okay, I understand it. You're not sick now. Because a lot of us think about the future, right? A future family with kids. Oh, Seth might not be able to help take care of us one day if he gets sick, right? Versus if you're already in the relationship and that happens, I feel like it's a little bit different dynamics. Again, I can't speak on that, but at least I can speak on, when it happened with my dad and my mom. My dad stood by her side throughout the whole time. And I want someone, the woman version of my dad one day, because if that happens, it happens. But it's also scary to see what it did to my mom and other friends, and saying that could be me one day. And I think that's the scary part. But Daniel, the other thing, and it kind of goes back to the motivation piece and kind of understanding just the aspects of life. I lost 2 friends at an early age. One of them was a good friend in college who unexpectedly died in an accident. And then another one had the juvenile version of Huntington's disease, which just progresses a lot faster. So it's even more rare than Huntington's disease. And she passed away when she was 26. And, they kind of taught me just like how to live in the moment, right? To share your story, to kind of live with that positive mindset. And so that's kind of what I try to remind myself of like, how can I continue to live in the moment and understand that, I got to take things a day at a time.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's definitely, I think for a lot of advocates, there's a couple of things that you said there that I was like, yep, I'm right there with you. It's like when you're already diagnosed with something, or when you know that something is in your body, HIV, you're like, okay, yes, I know we can live a lot longer. Yes, I know there's medications, but yes, it's also true that everybody's different and my body can take a turn at any minute. So I've got to for instance, I'm on this invisible timeline. I'm like, I've got to do this. I've got to leave my mark in the world for just in case.
Exactly. That's
Does that
exactly
make sense?
it. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like I thought about that of like, what can I do now to kind of leave my mark? And so I started, prior to COVID, I was doing a little traveling. I was in Costa Rica. I did a trek in Nepal. I just decided to try to live more in the moment and do what's in my control. And that's something that I'm, again, learning through mindfulness practice of like, the future is in the future. Yes, it's okay to be like real about it, right? Because there's a difference between being like, oh, live in the moment, but also being realistic of what could happen. And then, but saying, is that in my control? Can I do anything about that in this very moment? And no, I can't predict the future. But what I can do is I can enjoy what I have today and do my best to like say, hey, I'm going to advocate for myself and for others. I'm going to share my story, because if not me, then who?
Oh my God, you gave me chills. That is such a Garza thing to say. And like, if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? Like, why? And or equal to, why not me? Why not me put myself out there? Like, somebody's got to do it. So
yeah.
And then the other thing, again, you mentioned what I was writing down, like living in the moment. It's like right now I have the energy, I have the mental capacity. Basically, I'm body, mind, and soul are available to work together. So let me do what I can to do what I can. Because, for instance, for me, when I was going through cancer, body, mind, and soul were not talking to each other at all. Yeah. They were like on this, like, I'm the diva of the situation. And it was so hard to get myself coordinated that when I came out of it, I'm like, I'm going to do whatever I can. So you mentioned at the top of the show, like, you're so busy. It's because right now I'm centered in that level. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does. And I do like to keep busy for sure. But I also learned like, I can't just like also surround myself all the time about health related stuff, right? Like I work in the space now. I live with a rare disease. I volunteer for my nonprofit, and like, that's a lot, right? And that can be a lot on your just mental health. And so I've learned to take also time to exercise or to hang out with friends or just simply watch TV or watch sports. And so, yeah, do I have my tough days, Daniel? Of course. I think everyone does. And I think what I've learned also as a male in this world is like, it's okay to be vulnerable, right? It's okay to show these emotions and say, I'm having a tough time. And I did that a lot last year when I was just dealing with some bad anxiety, trying to figure out kind of the next steps in my life, personally, professionally, all the above. And, reached out to my family and my friends saying I'm struggling, right? And it felt good to say that because I didn't have to like hide it. Because the other thing is, I didn't mention this before, but it actually took me about 3 years to tell my dad, my sister that I tested, or telling any of my family. Yeah. I told a few friends, but at the time I didn't want to. I think there's a couple of things. One, I didn't want to worry, my dad, my sister, my family. I didn't want my sister to also maybe feel pressured to get tested. She's older. And I also didn't want my mom to ever just find out, because, right, she was already suffering. I didn't want her to say, oh crap, I gave my son this sucks. Right. And so that it took a lot to realize after the fact. I wish I told them at the beginning, because they're my family and they're going to, love me and be a part of my life forever. But, I didn't, it's not like I was like, oh, I live life with regrets. It was just more like, here's a learning experience. This is what I learned from it. And now I share that with others, saying like, have your support system when you're facing a difficult life decision, because they're going to be there for you no matter what.
Yeah. And disclosure is it's one of those words or one of those actions that is both so negative or dirty, and yet and yet so freeing. When we're hiding things from people, it's like, no, I don't want. It's like being the beast. Like, I don't want anybody to know. But then once you do it, and people around you come out and be like, hey, I've been going through this too. Like, oh, hey, I've been going through something similar. Yeah. And all of a sudden you realize that you're in this support. I don't know why Google just started, but yes, Google, celebrate with me. But does that make sense? It's like when you're, it's a before and after effect.
It was interesting because once I told my dad and my sister, and I was like, I want to do, and I'll answer that question in a second regarding the one that just popped up. But once I told my dad and my sister, I had like an article written in my local newspaper. And I remember my dad was like, can I share this on Facebook? I was like, yeah, go for it. And as soon as he shared it, like I had like cousins and friends being like, oh, I had no idea. And I was like, yeah, here it is. But it was also cool to see that there's people that I grew up with that were like, oh, I also have this health condition. I remember there's this woman who was a grade below me in high school. And she like pinged me one day on Instagram. I was like, hey, here's my story. Like, I live with this health condition too. And I've been following what you're doing. And it was just kind of cool. Like now we're connected more. And it's because of this piece of it. So it's like, you never know who's going to hear your story and who's going to also appreciate it. And I think that's what I always am passionate about, is like, I always tell people like, it's never about me. It's about helping others who may need to hear it at that time, or may need that extra like reminder of, hey, it's going to be okay. But I will say, Daniel, like, sometimes I will say it too early, specifically when dating, because like, I think it's the fear of, I don't want to be pushed away. So if I'm like, hey, if I tell them ahead of time, then maybe it's kind of me pushing them away before they can do that to me. It's a work in progress. I've learned it's not about like sharing it right off the bat, but it is a part of me. And, if someone says, hey, what were you doing today? I was on put it together conversations. Oh, about what? Oh, my story. What's your story? Right. It eventually comes out. And so I'm fine with that. I've accepted that. Or someone Googles me, which has happened, and someone's like, wow, I saw you have Huntingtons. That's scary. I said, yeah, I know.
Yeah. Do
It's
you
just,
ever turn to Google? People are like, "Can I Google you?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, go
sure, good
ahead.
luck. Yeah, have fun.
Before we go to that question, I just want to put this one up. It's also nice to know you aren't alone. Yeah, that's definitely it's nice to know that whatever situation you're in. Plus, one of the things that's really cool is um, people are like, "What's cool about it?" No, what's really cool is that sometimes you read about somebody's story and their diagnosis, and even though you don't share a diagnosis, it inspires you to keep going forward or share your
Mhm.
story or disclose whatever it is. So yes, definitely. Can we go back to that other question that was on the board? Is
Yeah,
there a
yeah.
chance the Huntington's gene will never activate?
Man, I wish that was the case. I know there's some people, some like researchers trying to work on like kind of like silencing the gene, but the challenge is that, it's going to activate at some point, or it might have already activated per se. What researchers are looking at is, can we halt it where it's at, right? So that it doesn't continue to, make a person deteriorate, or can we make it so it progresses a lot slower, or can we reverse it? So then suddenly, instead of, your brain cells dying, new ones are growing. So it kind of replaces it. It's going to take a lot of time just with research. And I would say, it's, it's tough when like, I want to help the community understand that there's a lot of companies working in Huntington's disease. A lot of them are in like, early stage, like looking still at animal models. But when I first learned about it, when, again, 15 years ago, there's like maybe one or two companies working on it. There's over 20 companies working in the space. Again, a lot of them are early on, but, it gives me hope. But I also am trying to figure out, how do I also explain to these researchers or companies, like, yes, I'm going to stay hopeful, but I also, like, we got to figure something out now. Like, there needs to be some urgency behind it, because they need to understand my future, right? My mom was sick for 17 years of my life. That's a long freaking time. And I lost out on a lot of memories with my mom, or even future memories. I don't want the same thing to happen if I have a family one day where they're like, oh, I only remember Seth when he was sick. I only remember dad when he was sick, or seeing these changes. I want to be able to enjoy my life and find a way to improve my quality of life, not waiting 10 years down the road. I want something now. And so I actually, I think of it as these two different areas. It's one is the ALS community. They've done a tremendous job of like just advocating, saying we need something now, right? Because our condition progresses fast. Now with Huntington's, it doesn't progress as fast, but it's the slow period of time, which can also make it just as bad, because you're like, wow, I have to watch this person suffer for 10, maybe 20 years, and I can't do anything about it. But I also look at like, have you ever heard of like the book or documentary How to Survive a Plague? About
Yeah.
about the like AIDS epidemic. Like,
Mhm.
they were, there was this big urgency of like, hey, people are dying, or people are suffering. Like, we need to do something now. Like, we need to figure this out. And to see that community come together, I was just like, how do we do that? How do we not just do that with Huntington's disease, but how do we do that just with the rare disease community, or just the health community in general, right? Like, how do we work on some of these conditions to just find ways to slow it down at first, right? Let's slow it down, and then figure out the next step might be to reverse it, or something else, right?
So before we go on, we have some more questions on the board, but you're watching Putting Together Conversations. I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza. My guest today is Seth Rotberg, and we're talking about Huntington's disease and his life and how he puts it together. So there's a certain part to the question that we just asked. I don't know if this is related, if it's kind of on the same answer, but is there a certain age where one can assume the gene is there, but it's most likely not going to activate?
Yeah, so everyone has like the Huntington gene. So you get one copy from your dad, one copy from your mom, and so everyone has it. But then those who have Huntington's disease, like, they have the mutant piece of it, which is the one that, acts up, right? It's like think of it like the troublemaker that just always acting up. And so how it works is, I'll kind of try to bring back the science piece of like, in biology class, you'd have to like have those letters C, A, G, T, U, and you'd have to like match them up, or, I don't know if any of this is making sense,
Yes.
but with Huntington's, you have these CAG repeats.
Okay.
And so they say, I think believe it is like 36 or 37 or above means if you have that number of repeats, you're going to get the gene, or you're going to get you're going to be eventually get it. The higher it is, the more progressive. So I want to say it's either 50 or 60 and above means that you're going to probably get it as a kid or a teenager, which is the juvenile version of it. And then it gets a little tricky where I think it's 26 or below is normal. And then there's like this gray area where in between, like I think 27 to 35 or so, like there's still a chance that your kid could get it, or there's still a very small chance that you might get it like later on in like your 60s or 70s and get like a mild dose of it.
So before you continue, what you're saying might answer this question. Is there a way that they can test the gene as to how active it is? So that's kind of what you're talking about right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it gets tricky because the first thing was that they thought of, okay, like you have this gene or you test it. So like, and the higher it is, the earlier it might come up. But they say that you might get it between the ages of 30 to 50. That's a large range of like, okay, what does that mean? And then they're like, well, if you have the same number of CAG repeats as your parent, you'll probably get it around the same time as them. But now they're saying that, again, it can come earlier on with that cognitive psychiatric decline. And so now they're trying to figure out, are there other pieces to the brain or, the Huntington gene where we can really detect when exactly it's going to be, when it's going to start. I think that's the tough part is they're never going to, I shouldn't say never, but I don't know if they will find like, hey, you're going to get this at the age of 38 or 39. So
cool. Here's another question on the board. Do you think that the new RNA vaccines could help lead to a new gene treatment for Huntington's?
That's a good question. I mean, there's some companies right now working on just, I think RNA kind of treatment options. Again, these are in early stage and like animal models. I don't know if there'll be much that the RNA vaccines can help with new treatments for Huntington's disease, but I think the more research we do and the more we can kind of connect the dots, the more we can find these opportunities. I think that we just have to figure out, well, what's going to work and what's not. But also, like, again, it comes back to, are these companies working to understand the unmet needs of all community members, not just those that are diagnosed, but those like myself who are pre-symptomatic and getting my voice heard? Because if I had to pick between motor symptoms, cognitive, and psychiatric, I'd rather deal with motor symptoms, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, that's my personal preference, but I've also surveyed young adults and asked them the same question. And I want to say 70% or so also said, hey, I'd rather deal with motor symptoms and have a treatment or something to help with the cognitive and psychiatric symptoms of Huntington's disease.
There's another question on board. And before I post the other question, I want to say people are really interested in what you're talking about. Before I post it, there are no dumb questions, Piper, so I appreciate all questions. Is Huntington disease also a hormonal-based disease?
That is a good question. I wouldn't say it's a dumb question because I don't know the answer. I'm like, it's more of just like a more of a dominant, versus like a recessive type gene, if that makes sense. But I don't know necessarily if that's the case. I've never been asked that question.
We'll get back to her on that one. We'll do a little research and check out, see if we can figure it out. First of all, you're such an encyclopedia of information, which is really exciting because there's stuff that I really didn't know about it. And then I did just folks, yes, I did just the basic, like Google, tell me what this is.
Yeah, Google.
And I got the feel just so that I would know what you're talking about if we started talking about it. But you have filled me up. I was like, wow, like this might be a weird question, but do you get scared? And if you do, how do you get through it?
So before I answer that, because I was really curious about that question before. So to describe it, it's like a hereditary neurodegenerative disease. Looking at quick research, it does say that it has pieces of what did she it was
I'll put it back up.
Was it hormonal?
Hormonal based.
Yeah, it looks like there could be signs and like what they say pre-manifest, which is like pre-symptomatic. But yeah, I would have to dive deeper into that. So cool. Again, it was a good question by Piper.
We'll get back to you, Piper. See, folks, this is the kind of show we have here. We don't just talk. We research. We educate.
Research. Yes.
We're on it, folks.
So regarding your question about am I scared or yes, I would say there's always a fear because I don't want to I don't want to end up like my mom one day. And what I mean by that is like, the Huntington's disease part of it. Of course, she was great in other ways. She had a sense of humor and whatnot. But it's a scary time because I'm racing against time and I don't know when it's going to happen. And I think the other thing is, yes, I have friends and family, but like, I don't want to end up alone, if that makes sense. I want to have that romantic partner. And I think I'm scared that like, I'm 30 and, I have a lot of friends who are in serious relationships or married or have kids. And then I'm like, that's what I want because I had to grow up a lot faster than I would say a lot of my friends because I had to, deal with my mom's, disease and kind of try to understand the different aspects of me testing positive for it as well. And so that's why I said at the beginning, I'm 30 going on 50 because I have an old soul and I'm like, ready for that. But I also realize you can't force that in. You can't force like the aspect of like a relationship or anything. And you just have to kind of let it happen, or it usually happens when you least expect it. And I do agree with Piper. You're racing against an invisible clock that you don't know when it's going to, I guess, strike midnight.
Yeah, no, there's on my mom's side, there is a lot of people with mental loss problems, dementia, Alzheimer's. And so I worry about that. Like, is it something, because my sister jokes about it, that she forgets things. I'm like, don't joke about that. Like, mom died from Alzheimer's complex. Like, don't joke about that. That is so real. Because folks ask me, it's like, why do you do all these videos? Why do you have all these pictures? I'm like, because one day if I start forgetting, I want Christian, my partner, to be like, hey, here's pictures. Do you remember this? Like, I know it maybe sounds silly and simplistic, but I want those memories printed somewhere. If you come to my house, there's I send out for a lot of printed books so I could have those pictures available. Awesome. So I totally get you. And Piper, yes, it's an invisible clock that I don't think even people with the same diagnosis, like, you really don't, like, you understand it, but you don't understand it because it's your own personal race, your own marathon.
And I think that's what's tough at times, to be honest, is like, I love my friends to death and whatnot, but sometimes it's just like, they're like, well, why are you worried about the future? Why are you so focused on the future? I'm like, because you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to deal with that mental piece of it. And I think that's what's so challenging is like, just simply listen to like, when I am struggling, yes, I'm struggling and I'll be okay. And I'll remind myself of that. But like, if I want to talk about the future and saying, this is how I feel, like, let me be. And I think that's what can be challenging. But I think the other piece is what's different with like Huntington's or just where I'm at. And it's not to compare myself to others, but like, other people are officially diagnosed with their health condition, where I'm
sorry.
I was just going to say, and I'm not officially diagnosed, but I'm, again, mentally preparing, which is a little different, as well as kind of helping out, as a, I guess, quote unquote caregiver to my mom. So it is a little bit different, but it still impacts me because of that future piece of it.
Now, before you answer that next question, I will remind everybody you're watching Put It Together Conversations. I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza. My guest today is Mr. Seth Rotberg, and we're talking about Huntington's disease, life, and living in the future, but being in the present.
Yeah.
So please join the conversation. If you're watching this on a replay, please still join in the conversation. Post your questions, comments, and I'll make sure that I get them to Seth. The question, how do you parse out the feelings on reproduction and the passing on this gene to your potential children?
Great question. So, as we know, or at least what I learned was there's two options at the time, was adoption or having having a kid naturally. And then, later on I went to see a genetic counselor, said, okay, what other options do I have? And I learned about in vitro fertilization with pre-implementation genetic testing, so IVF with PGT. And what that is it's what they do is they test the embryos, and then they put the healthy ones back into the woman, hoping that they have enough to produce a baby that doesn't have the gene. The challenge with that is it can be very expensive. It may not be covered by health insurance, and the success rate may not be, as high, right? So it's, my thought is, well, how do we make sure insurance does cover this? Because, you'd think that for them, it's going to help the insurance out long-term, where it's going to save on medication, doctor's visits, hospital visits, all those things. The other option is a sperm donor. So I always make this joke just because I'm like, if that is an option, I'm like, okay, which of my friends do I shoot a text to, say, hey, I need a favor? I'm like, I need help.
I'm sorry.
Or like, I don't know if you've ever done like fundraisers where you put in a donation request. But I ask like an athlete, like, hey, I don't need a signed football. I need something else.
Sorry, folks.
But it's good to know that, sperm donation is an option, right? And that I do have, I guess, 4 different options. But it's tough. Like, would I want to have kids naturally? I mean, personally, no. Only because I would say that there's a higher chance if the dad has the disease, there's a higher chance that the kid could get a higher repeat, which means that they could get it at an earlier age. Gotcha. And just knowing that I had friends who dealt with that juvenile version and seeing what it did to my mom, I'm like, I don't want to pass this down to my kids if I have kids. But there's all these different ways. I mean, maybe I'll just end up adopting a bunch of dogs too, because dogs are awesome.
So before we go on to the other comments, because we have some more questions on the board, this is about the time where I asked my guests to share some words of wisdom with the audience. Seth Rotberg, what words of wisdom would you like to share?
Well, I won't talk about sperm donation anymore. I would say, there's a lot of things that come to mind, but I think for words of wisdom is when you have a friend who might be struggling or a loved one who's struggling, like, don't be afraid to reach out and just say, hey, I'm here to talk, because you never know when they're going to need that support from you. And, we're all dealing with our own challenges in life. And so it's also just as important that when you're struggling, that you reach out to your support system, or kind of try to be self-aware of, what are your resources out there? Is it, friends and family? Is it coworkers? Is it other members of your health community? Is it a therapist, psychiatrist, right? Like, what's going to help you when you're having a tough day or just need to talk to a peer or a professional about your challenges?
So we have a couple more questions. Yeah, and I've always told friends, like, say the word. If you're talking to your friend about a disease, say it. Say the word. Like when I was going through anal cancer, it's anal cancer. Let's talk about the butt cancer. Like, let's do it. Bring it up. Like, not saying the word doesn't take it away. Like, it's still there. So let's be honest and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Here's the other question. Does it bother you that some people's heads are so in the clouds about life?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say so. I guess for me, it's like, it's challenging when people, and I do it too, but I've learned a lot from it. Is like, don't appreciate the little things in life when they're like, oh, can't believe my mom said this or that, or I'm so frustrated. I'm like, I wish I could still have those conversations with my mom, right? And I think, oh, I know Jen, so that's very interesting. Hi, Jen. But I think it's challenging because sometimes people they get so frustrated or upset about like these what I call little things, and we all do it. But I'm also like, try to put yourself in someone else's shoes who's dealing with something more challenging. I mean, I honestly wish that in some ways that each person who like graduated high school or before graduating college had to go like live abroad, or had to do something to kind of see the other side of things and understand like, wow, I have it good, right? I have life pretty good. And I'm saying this as someone that I would say has life pretty good, but also was dealt the wrong hand in life with Huntington's disease. So I just say that because I learned not just from that, but I also did an AmeriCorps program where I served a year at a high school in Boston with under-resourced high school students to really understand what those needs were, and then said, how can I support them? How can I better help them? I think that's always been my passion, is just helping others who are facing adversity because of my own experience, but also because I believe in each person has the potential to make a difference.
I agree with you. There was some time. I'm not gonna lie. There's still some times now where I look at people and I'm like, what are you thinking? Like what? Like where does that? But I think it. You might agree with this. There are times. There's those of us who are chosen to go through longer, darker tunnels than other folks, and that is neither their fault nor my fault. Nobody's to blame for that.
Yeah.
But when you've been dealt this particular hand, and I can only speak for myself, is you kind of like, well, I want to take every moment that I can, like take the bull by the horns and see what I can do, so that when the moments that I have time to sit back and just relax. Like lately, for instance, for me, my lately is Korean soap operas. That is my go-to right now.
Okay.
A friend of mine, Michael, that I worked with a couple of months ago, got me into them, and that is my that's why I escape. Like I escape to those things for a little bit, but. And I say this because for all the folks out there, we all have our own struggles, and you have your struggles. You're watching this, and I know that. And there are those of us who are dealing with diagnoses and things that, the pill every day reminds you that you have to maintain this. So I try to do as much as I can in one day. And sometimes it's like the outcome of working so hard is more painful than the actual diagnosis.
Yeah.
But that's when I feel like I'm alive. Like, oh my God, like I did something. Fear in a name only increases fear of the thing itself. Oh, yes, Jen. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Jen. Is that what I'm gathering?
I do. Yes. So yes, your cover is blown. Yeah. So Jen is a fellow young adult advocate who is just a rock star and just is trying to get more involved in the community and really share her story. She's also a singer and just had a song that came out that I would say that she was featured in. She should join the Put It Together conversation. She has a really, really compelling story. So
hit me up, Jen. Throw me a message and we'll connect.
Yeah. If you're having a tough day, what are some of the ways to roll through the emotions and then pick yourself back up? So, I mean, last year, when I was dealing with some of these tough days and just dealing with some bad anxiety, I think one was just, the biggest thing is just getting out of bed, right? And trying to say, okay, what did I do today? What did I accomplish? Oh, I got out of bed. I had breakfast. I went for a walk, right? Like, even though it may not sound like a lot, it's something better than nothing at all. I would also journal. Now I do, practice mindfulness, even if it's usually just 10 minutes a day in the mornings to really start my day. Just trying to exercise, or just calling a friend to, I guess you could say, to vent, or to just, talk with them and connect. So, there's some of those things, or it's like trying to watch something funny, like a comedy, like Whose Line Is It Anyways? Or it's playing video games with my friends online, or just trying to keep my mind off of those tough days. But we all deal with it. So
Yeah. I want to highlight the word venting, because people are so fearful of, like, no, I can't call anybody. Nobody wants to hear me bitch and vent. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Because then that gives us permission to be able to call somebody and vent and bitch about the day. And I am eternally grateful. God, the universe, and life are very good to me. But there are days when I'm like, what are y'all thinking? Like, what the hell? And I just want to call somebody and go, today sucks. Today just sucks. And I think it's not about putting out negative energy. It's a fact. Today just doesn't feel right, and I need somebody to know this.
Yeah, I will say I try not to go to the same person. Got you, Jen. I try not to go to the same person each time, because I also know that they're human too, and it might be too much on them. And so I try to switch it up, but I also go see a therapist. So that also helps too, a professional. So, I think that's also just as important.
The funny thing is that some of the comments pop up out of sequence, like from where the conversation is.
Oh,
so I'm not sure what you say no to. I'm like, what are you saying no to? You don't want to come on my show? You don't want to be part of the political
family? That's messed up.
How dare you, Jen Peterson? But I definitely will. Cool. Yeah, hit me up. We'll work it out. Sir, we're coming down to the end of the show. We've got about 3 minutes left to go. Anything else? Anything else you want to add to the conversation?
As I mentioned at the beginning, this month, May, is Huntington's Disease Awareness Month. And I think it's just so important for people to be aware of it, but also be aware of all the other kind of health conditions out there. There's over 7,000 rare diseases, but then there's also a ton of chronic and cancer conditions out there too. And so I always find it valuable to be able to connect with people like you, Daniel, right? We have two different kind of health conditions, but yet we're still able to, that's fun. We're still able to like have these conversations, right? We're still able to understand each other. And I think that's what's so powerful, is that when you kind of deal with this health condition just in general, right? You have this big community behind you who you can kind of go to through the good times, but also the not so good times. And so if people do want to connect, my website's there. They can hit me up. I'm more than happy to chat, or just learn from them as well. And so I just appreciate being on the show on a beautiful day.
Now, are you on Instagram as well?
Yeah.
Is it on your website, or can you want to say it out? Or can you tell us what it is right now? I didn't post it, but
yeah, it's just at Rotberg15.
All right, at S Rotberg. So just go check them out.
Yeah. I mean, there's no other Seth Rotberg out there. So I mean, and my Instagram's public.
And if you are, you've got a lot to compete at. These are big shoes to fill in for a Seth Rotberg. So just saying.
I already looked. People put an H in my last name for some reason, and so.
Thank you, Haley.
Haley, my colleague.
Thank you for watching.
Haley's awesome.
Sir, thank you so much for coming on the show. I so appreciate you, and I'm so grateful that the universe and We Go Health brought us together to work. You inspire me, you motivate me, and I consider you a friend. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, same with you, Daniel, and just appreciate the opportunity. And one of these days we'll get together, and when things kind of settle down, this whole pandemic and whatnot. So looking forward to it.
Yes, we will share some tacos as soon as this
Only on Tuesday, though. Taco Tuesday, baby.
Yeah, just saying. I'm going to put you in the green room for right now. Thank you so much for being on the show. Don't go away. Let me just say goodbye to everybody.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Oh, sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you're good. See ya.
Thank you. For everybody watching, this has been Putting Together Conversations. I'm your ghost. I am your host, Daniel G. Garza. My guest today was Mr. Seth Rotberg, talking about Huntington disease, life, and the invisible timeline that we all live in. If you would like to be a guest on the show, please hit me up on direct message on any of the pages or any channels that you're watching us on, either Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter. If you're on YouTube, though, will you do me a favor and scroll down and hit that subscribe button and like this video? That would help us a whole lot. I want to thank everybody for watching and joining the conversation. This show is about you being part of the conversation. And again, if you'd like to be part of the show, please just hit me up and let me know. Put It Together Conversations is a show about folks, about you, where you come from, where you are now, and what your journey has been like. And the idea is to motivate and inspire other people to go after their dreams and goals. So what are your dreams and goals? For now, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm Daniel G. Garza, and put it together.